aware of this particular word in this last 2 3 years by this at this point of time. This is actually the buzzword, or people were saying is the word of the decade since the pandemic began, and I'm sure you have got accustomed to hearing it either in your household or in your classes or on the TV or on social media everywhere. Whether it's about personal resilience, resilience of the nature, resilience of a community, etc. And it's sometimes at one point of time we do begin to wonder whether the word is actually losing its meaning or its value by so much of overuse and overexploitation. Well, policymakers are using it for their benefits. The corporate houses are using it to exploit the labor here, and various capitalist mechanisms that are going on around the world right now is actually using this particular terminology to continue their particular mechanisms in order to in order to continue with their corporate lobbyism to actually exploit natural resources. But before we go into much deeper conversations, we just need to understand what this word actually defines as. So, even though there are various definitions of resilience as per characteristics according to various communities, the basic idea, the basic concept, refers to the ability to withstand or to recover quickly from adverse situations. So whenever we are talking about resilience, we talk we the keywords actually are recovering, adaptation, or to change, and perturbations. These are the words that are actually used. But when we narrow it down to certain specific definitions, these are some of the definitions that have been actually used by various scholars and policymakers over the years to justify the means they are going with. For example, when we are talking about individual resilience or mental resilience, the American Psychological Association came up with the definition of term that they say that it is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. So it refers to an individual's mental health or well-being when a person or a child or an adult is actually facing certain traumatic situations and how they're becoming resilient to that situation. So the American Psychological Association defined resilience in those terms. The Urban Land Institute, however, actually incorporated certain social aspects of this definition when they defined it as the ability to prepare and plan for, to absorb and recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. Like, for example, if you can see the various natural disasters that are actually occurring around us, it often displaces people, and the ones who are most affected by it are the marginalized. So when we look into the idea of resilience from their perspective, it is always the idea of preparedness and to the idea of measuring the risk behind it that actually comes into play. So that is another definition of resilience that we can attribute to. But the Stockholm Resilience Center, who actually work brilliantly on the various climate change factors, they talk of resilience as the capacity of a system, basically, whether it can be an individual system or a coherent system of many collective individuals, a forest, a city, an economy that can continue to deal with change and adapt with that change. They say that it is about how the humans and nature can use shocks and disturbances like a financial crisis or climate change to spur out renewal and innovative thinking. So basically, the constant changes that we face, the humans face, or the ecosystems face, they are actually described as shocks or disturbances. And every time we face this kind of shocks, the process or the method in which we recover and come back to that same state of balance is what is defined as resilience by the Stockholm Resilience Center. But beside these definitions, as I was talking in the beginning, when I started, that different institutes have defined the idea of resilience as per their agenda or motives. But overall, we can say that resilience can be divided into actually four domains. That is the ecological resilience, the social resilience, the socio-ecological resilience, and the adaptive cycle network. So these are the four domains that have been actually identified over the years, where the various characteristics of resilience has been identified and reorganized. And we are going to understand these various domains. So the first one is the ecological resilience. Now the man here on this here is C.S. Hollins. He is the pioneer of this resilience thinking framework. He's a Canadian ecologist. He's almost 91 years of age, and his writings are still effective till date on how he had perceived resilience, and he has continued to adapt on his writings, on his research on the resilience framework. Now, Hollings described or defined resilience on the idea of equilibrium. What he basically meant is that the natural system or an individual system is always in a state of balance, and every time there a disturbance comes in, an outside shock comes in, this balance gets challenged. And despite this, the uh, the system has an ability to either absorb these particular shocks and come back to and again come back to that original state of equilibrium, and that is what he described it as ecological resilience. But over the years, as he did more research, he realized that ecological resilience cannot be defined in such in a black and white way. There are multiple layers attached to it. He said that sometimes ecosystems do not come back to that same form of equilibrium. With the changing forms of shocks or disturbances, sometimes those ecosystems adapt and they give birth to a new state of balance. Like they adopt and transform to a new state of balance. And that is what should be defined as ecological resilience. So the definition that he previously gave, then started describing it as engineered resilience. So, in a very simple manner, in a layman's language, what I can tell you is whenever an ecosystem absorbs a shock, it changes the variables affected, where it is constantly, its parameters are changing, but it comes back to that same state again. It is known as engineering resilience, which means it is recovering back to its original form. But in case of ecological resilience, when a particular ecosystem is getting so many shocks, is getting affected by so many disturbances, that it finally reorganizes itself to a new form of equilibrium, that is known as ecological resilience. And that is the concept that Hollins introduced of single and multiple equilibriums. And this is something that we can found in our day-to-day understanding of nature. You have heard about that cyclone Amphan that had devastated lower South Bengal, especially the Sundarbans. And even the city of Kolkata was actually brought to its knees. But you have to understand that this was not the only cyclone Sundarban had faced in the few years. Over the last 5 years, Sundarbans had faced severe cyclones and natural disasters that had actually changed the people's mindset of it. When it started with the cyclone of Ayla. It was the first severe cyclone that Sundarban had seen over a century, that had affected the situation there, and it was in 2006. Uh, and people were actually adapting, and they're changing to the situation. But over the years, as the frequency of the cyclones increased, the floods started to occur more and more. The people of Sundarbans and the authorities, they realized that they cannot always go back to the same situation they were in, because this is going to happen continuously over the years, with the changing the changing climate, the anthropocentric consequences of human consumption over the years. So what they need to do is they need to adapt to the changes and prepare for the upcoming risks. And with that, they started building, they started becoming more resilient to that situation. They started preparing more disaster management strategies. They are bringing out effective policies, so that the people can actually, face off this adverse situation. Though there is a lot to be done, even though there is a lot to be done, if you go there and talk to the people out there, you realize that uh, uh, their situation might have improved in the last 10 to 12 years, and that is more because of the, because of the human agencies. Because in the past, in the last few decades, because of the use of social media, the awareness of this situation in Sundarban has become so much more prominent, that actually people are getting more help than before. So this is how, the people have adapted to this change here, and the ecosystem itself has adapted to this change. Besides this, however, there is another concept of, sorry, another domain of resilience that actually needs to be understood, is that of the social resilience. Now, what is social resilience? Uh, very recently, Hartmut Funkfeld, he had argued that resilience has shown up in a plethora of fields, and it has various meanings. Uh, but 2 years ago, his colleague Marcus Keck, and they had Marcus Keck and Hartmut had actually reviewed the idea of social resilience in a special issue paper. And according to that paper, they had defined that social resilience was about social entities and their ability, and their abilities to tolerate, absorb, cope, and to adjust to environmental and social threats of various kinds. The development of this concept actually started with a very unspecific understanding of social resilience as a capacity to respond, which then evolved to incorporate notions of learning and adaptations, and also the acknowledgement of the various roles played by power, politics, and participation of human agencies in the context of increasing uncertainty and surprise. Now, while we are talking about social resilience, we need to understand that there are three types of capacities that are necessary for understanding this notion. First is the coping capacities. Next is the adaptive capacities, and finally the transformative capacities. Now, when we are talking about coping capacities, we talk about the absorptive measures of how people can cope and overcome immediate situations or threats. The adaptive capacities talk about the preventive measures that people often employ to learn from past experiences and to anticipate, future risk, and how they can adjust their livelihoods accordingly. While the transformative capacities talk about, a person's ability to access assets and assistance from the wider socio-political arena, to participate in decision-making processes, and to craft institutions that can improve, one's welfare, and also foster, the society's well-being towards future crises. Now, in order for this ability of communities to cope with these various external disturbances, one must get access to these particular domains. That is, equality in access to natural resources, the need for a sustainable human resources, the need for inclusive governance structures and processes, access to fair allocation of economic resources, and robust built environment and amenities. Now, how do we get that? So basically, the thing is that when we are talking of social resilience, we have to understand that it is closely related to the idea of social capacity. That is endowment of how different kinds of assets, such as these, financial capital, physical capital, natural capital, and human capital, are actually utilized. But we all know that these are actually a result of the, social relations in society, and how social networks are recognized uh, in and how they play a key role in building and maintaining social resilience. So basically, what is accessible to me might not be accessible to a person who is actually, in a lesser privileged situation than me. So here, what we need to do is, we need to understand that the particular institutions, such as the state authorities or the national authorities, they need to be much more resilient, so that they can provide this equal distribution of means that provides each and every person an equitable understanding of resilience. The For example, I can show you by an example. um, I think most of you are aware of this photo. This was taken by the late Danish Siddiqui during when our lockdown began, when the various migrant workers from the different urban cities had actually had to migrate back to their hometowns in the lack of earning opportunities, and with lack of proper transportation systems, they had to travel thousands of kilometers to their homes. And this photo was of migrant worker Dayaram Kushwaha, who was carrying his 5-year-old son as they were walking along the Delhi highway during which was announced on 26th March. So we are, you are students of IIT Kharagpur. I am a research scholar here. We all face this lockdown. We all face different forms of difficulties in our home from our institute. But it would be wrong to say that we all can identify with the problems that we face. We can we can empathize with what Dayaram faced, but none of us know what he actually had to go through to overcome that situation. For many in this country, air flights were arranged to bring them back home, but for people like Dayaram, not even a bus could be arranged. For many in this country, they could sit in their home and work from home and keep getting salaried. But for many, jobs had been lost. For months, they had to sit in their home and use up their savings. So that is what I was talking about. That because our struggles, why were our struggles different? Because we, because first of all, the notion that we all are equal here on the financial perspective is wrong to assume. Different people have different privileges and different needs and demands. But it is the government, or you can say the authorities or the institutions, role to identify the different needs and actually provide the basic needs according to the situation. So this is what social resilience talks about. Even though it will talk about the resilience of a community, this particular photo was actually publicized in various ways to show how the poor of India are becoming resilient. They are still I'm not sure if you have read certain of the articles. Why certain newspapers had used this picture to show the plight of the poor. Certain newspapers had used it to show on the global perspective that how India is the poor of India are actually overcoming such severe situations, and they are still working. What to say? How do I describe it? It was such a badly written article, and it basically told that how that we need to learn from the poor, that how they are actually overcoming the situation. So I had written a short post at that point of time in EPW about the many meanings of resilience, where actually which was the concept came into my mind after reading that article, that how basically the situation of the marginalized and the underprivileged are actually used by various policymakers to glorify this particular term of resilience. So this is an aspect of social resilience that I wanted to talk about. Now let's come to the socio-ecological and the adaptive cycle of resilience portion. So what is basically this? So like C.S. Holland had actually engineered the idea of ecological resilience. Um, in his later works, he, along with another author, Carl Folk and Gunderson, they said that it would be wrong to assume, first of all, that ecology and society are separate. They are actually intertwined, they are interconnected, and it is very important for us to see this embedded connections between ecology and society, that how the work between nature and society, the interplay between them and the deep legacies, this long history needs to be assessed. So basically, that's how they started, working on this concept of socio-ecological resilience, something that Carl Fox actually identified in his 1999 paper, where he talked about how this separation between ecology and society is artificial, and humans are an embedded part of nature, so they cannot be treated as a separate entity. So he defines socio-ecological resilience as the capacity to adapt or transform in the face of change in all socio-ecological systems, particularly unexpected change, uh, that will continue to support human well-being. And here came into the idea of adaptability, where they talk about the system's ability to organize and adapt, where adaptability referred to the human actions that sustain, innovate, and improve development on the current pathways. And this gave to the idea of the four-phase adaptive cycle, basically, where the idea of reorganization, conservation, release, and exploitation came into him. So basically, this four-phase adaptive cycle was developed by Holling and Gunderson, that which suggests that most, or although not all, but basically most of the systems follow a four-phase cycle of exploitation, conservation, release, and finally reorganization. So the idea of exploitation and conservation basically are a part of any standard ecological theory, where it is said that an ecosystem's an ecosystem is dominated by various colonizing species that are tolerant of environmental variations, and they adapt to such variations. However, the release phase actually talks about those shocks or disturbances, basically, where a release can be, for example, a forest fire, or a hurricane. That can be described as the phase of the release phase, and they can actually lead to a lot of you know subsets of change that the ecosystem has to adapt to in and reorganize in the following phases. So that is what can be described as an adaptive cycle of resilience. But overall, saying that in this four phase adaptive cycle, what Hollins and Gunderson actually try to propagate is that the smaller the system, an ecosystem it is, the faster it will adapt. But a larger an ecosystem is, it will adapt more slowly to changes. Of course, because a smaller system will have less variables, less agencies, less human and multi-species interactions. But a bigger a system would be, it will have bigger influences, bigger human and other multi-species agencies, which will lead to a much more slower phase of adaptation. So this is something that was identified here. And I can actually, I would like to tell you this particular cycle through two stories, basically, that I enjoyed, and that describes basically how um, this adaptive cycle and socio-ecological system can be described. So the first thing that I can explain to you here is the story of the lemurs in Madagascar. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie Madagascar. Have you seen the animated film Madagascar?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah, great. So the prime characters in that movie were the lemurs. It was a famous character that was portrayed by Baron Cohen, Sacha Baron Cohen. And the lemurs of Madagascar are very prominent species of that particular region. Um, Hello? Am I audible, Shurdeep? Hello?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So the lemurs of Madagascar they are a very prominent species of this region. Over the years, however, due to too much human intervention, there are almost 50 separate species in the region of Madagascar alone. But over the past centuries, basically, you can say, due to human interventions, these lemurs have been going extinct. And a lot of it, a reason behind it can be said due to the constant exploitation of the green life cover of this region. If you basically use the the Google Maps to check out that the agro-pastoralist um, area of Madagascar, you will see a lot of barren lands. You will see huge tracts of barren lands on the map. But if you focus on specific regions, you will see small traces of forest. Actually, the more you magnify those regions on the map, um, it is said that the, the lemurs were actually very much important to maintaining the forest covers. Not only the lemurs, but also various other subsets and species who were there. So why would you say that? So it is said that the local tribe that resided in that area. I'm forgetting the name. Oh yeah, the Tandroy tribe. Yeah, the Tandroy tribe of Madagascar had actually a very deeply, cultural connection with the forests of Madagascar, of this particular region. They say that this tribe, centuries ago, had entered into a social contract with the trees, with the forest of this region, that they would never cut a single tree in this forest. And in turn, the trees will shield them, will shield their crops, the crop region, and it would provide them the manure. It will provide them other ecological resources that would actually lead to yielding of better harvest. But over the years, and the lemurs were kind of like the protectors of this forest because they were completely dependent on it. So this tribe and this and the forest region there actually had a very cultural connection out there. But in the recent years, in the last few decades, with the capitalist perception of this consumption policies in this region, the forest cover has been depleted. It has affected the wildlife, especially the lemurs there, and also the forest covered there. The lands have the lands have become completely barren, and the people there are facing severe, difficulties out there. Another so this is how it's, so in the case of Madagascar, you will see how the nature and cultural connection in society had co-evolved over years, and how they both adhered to their mutual resilience, how the wildlife preservation actually led to the resilient thinking of that particular biological land, of the flora and the fauna in the region, and how this particular resilience um, succeeded the social how to say this, the close knit understanding of cultural perceptions in that society. Another story is the lobster fishing story in Maine, US. So this is if you look into the lobster fishing history in Maine, you will see that it is one of the most profitable industries in this particular region. They are actually they are the fishery has been actually documented as remarkable examples of successful collective actions and multi-level governance in this region. And in contrast to many other fisheries in the Gulf of Maine, which actually comprises of the fishing industries of Canada and USA, the lobster population has actually not been overexploited, or it hasn't collapsed, which has actually led to the governance of the main lobster fishery to actually maximize in their abundance. And the fishers whose conservation ethics is, you know, they are actually, it's aligned with maintaining the abundance of lobster in the region. They have worked together collectively to minimize illegal actions and to preserve the reproductive populations of lobsters in this region. So, in overall, it can be called a success story for sustainable management of a heavily fish stock, and showed how how collective action can incorporate issues of power, conflict, and inequality in the region. However, the more deeper you probe into this case, you realize that there is a broader picture that emerges in this situation. It turns out that centuries of intense fishing in the Gulf of Maine had removed, the lobster predators, such as ground fish, such as the cords and haddock fishes, to such an extent that their role in regulating the lobster populations has completely disappeared. So the lobsters are the dominant species here. There are no predators for the lobsters here. But as a result of this, the lobster population has exploded like an insect outbreak, which has effectively, caused a monoculture of this lobster fishing practices. But in simplified ecosystems where this monoculture, such as only the lobster fishing actually occurs, they are actually more vulnerable to disturbances, and they can rapidly shift into alternative states in case they face any shocks because of their lack of resilience. This has been seen in New England. It's a region in US where also lobster fishing was popular, but once a lethal shell disease had actually, began in that area, which led to 70% decline of the lobster productions in this area. So if something like that occurs in Maine, the people, the fishers there will be severely affected. So the reason I told you these two stories are to show that the idea of resilience, or socio-ecological resilience, how they're interconnected, and there is always a broader picture behind it. For in the Madagascar story, the importance here to show is that in both the local these local cases are embedded within and dependent upon, and they are shaped by cross scale interactions both on temporal and spatial situations. Despite a life in the a fluctuating landscape of Madagascar and the documented history of hardship and poverty, the Tandroid tribe co-evolved a socio-ecological system that displayed remarkable persistence for for the region of Madagascar for centuries, and that ancestral contract played a critical role in keeping the biodiversity along with the social the social collectiveness of the community that guided their history and culture over centuries. But in the case of the main lobster fishery, this fishing market is tied to global market, and which makes it very fragile, especially to a the very recent worldwide economic crisis, when the consumer demand for lobsters can rapidly decline, and especially in case of international distribution of these lobsters, if in case they shut down, they would be in a very bad situation. So sometimes success stories are often masking various situations of vulnerability in this area. And finally, this is the last portion that I'll be actually explaining to you. That is the other side of resilience discourse. Now, in entire class, I talked and I explained to you the various types of resilience that is going around, and how various academics, scholars, policy thinkers actually describe it to their own way. But what about the voice of the people who are actually portrayed as the poster childs of resilience? Do they actually want to be resilient? The picture that I showed you a few moments ago of Dara, this picture is the epitome of resilience practices in various situations, in various magazines, in various research articles, examples. But what about his perception of resilience? Does he want to be resilient? In this past few years, I have seen that the term, the definition of resilience has been used as a buzzword by various, people in authorities from different ideologies and all, to actually garner their own political agenda. But the idea whether it is actually resilience is helpful in situation, whether calling people resilient or calling a community resilience is actually helpful or suggestive or providing a sustainable future, that is not being explored at all. Like, we have to understand something in the beginning. Resilience actually is not the absence of distress, But the feelings that arises from this distress, such as anger, anxiety, grief, disappointed, these are very common feelings. But every time you talk about these feelings that are happening to you, there are a lot of people who give TED talks of positive thinking, positive approach. They try to villainize this thought. So every feeling or a response serves a purpose. Anger helps in identifying injustice. Anxiety is a protective feeling. Grief emphasizes the value of what we have lost. And the current discourse around resilience, unfortunately, often ignores this. Resilience in today's world, unfortunately, has become toxic because of, I'm not saying to from all the people, but for certain groups we have to understand that what kind of solution resilience is bringing, because now this particular term is used as a toxic term, because resilience and well-being must intersect with each other. A holistic sense of well-being encompasses our physical health, mental health, emotional health, and the socio-ecological health of our ecosystem, um, uh, of the communities. So stress on any of these aspects is can create the need to build resilience. But how do we do that? For example, I can tell you the problem it is, why we are talking about this toxicity of this resilience discourses. It is being used to cover up a lot of issues. Okay. As I said to you when we are talking about social ecological resiliences, the resilient capacity of a person with a better of a privileged person, of a person with a better financial situation, uh, to hardships that has been occurring, it is much better than the people who are living in slums or the people who are actually belonging to marginalized communities. I'm not saying that to stereotype anything. I'm just trying to say that how uh, I'm just saying that to make you people understand and realize that acknowledgement of these differences needs to be referenced and understood whenever we are making policies for these people. Whenever a disaster occurs, it is, for example, of Sundarbans only. The people of Sundarbans, when you if you visit Sundarbans and you talk to them, you ask them that, you say that, oh, you people are so resilient. For so many years, you have been facing such situations. They will answer you in in less than a heartbeat that, did we ask to be resilient? Being resilient is not a choice for us. It is the absence of choice that is making us resilient. And this is something that I just wanted to discuss with Shorodip here. Can also share his experiences because he's working very closely with the fishermen of Sundarbans, and they can they have shared with us so many stories that actually have traumatized us by only hearing them for once. So imagine what they have been feeling over the past decade. So the problem with the resilience discourse, actually, what we can say is the constant, the lack of preparedness and using of the term as a buzzword basically has actually limited the use of social infrastructure or the institutional capability of various authorities to actually prepare a proper plan that would actually lessen the risk scenario in this situation, or provide them better, or provide those marginalized communities with better adaptive capabilities. So that is what something that we should aspire to, and not using the term to actually define the what to say, the lack of choice situations for the poor and the marginalized. So the picture on the left is of a school in Chilika that I had visited after cyclones Fani, and I had visited this place only after a month after the cyclone had happened, and it was a terrible situation for this for the people out there, because when we talked to them, we realized that the lack of, even though Orissa is known for its better preparedness in disaster management situations than most of the other states in our country, but of course there will be disparities when you see the situation in the in areas such as such cyclone prone areas such as Chilika. That when we talk to them, we realize that they didn't have enough cyclone shelters to house the people out there. And this school was supposedly a cyclone shelter, and it hadn't been repaired for decades, even though the state has been facing such this cyclones for years. And why do you think this happened? This because of the inequality in local governance scenarios. So the people, a lot of them had to move away, and they were actually moved away, but for schooling purposes, when they came back to their home again, it took them a long time to actually get the schools and the hospitals to get back on track again, and they had to depend on government handouts and help from the NGOs and the other people completely. The same things happen in Sundarban every year. Unfortunately, this was the picture on the right is of the villages in Kumirmari, where we had visited in last year, and this has just a few months before the Yas cyclone had hit them, and they were already talking about how they're preparing for the next cyclone because they do not have enough, infrastructure available. So when we talked to them, they had the people of Sundarban had become so much accustomed to natural disasters and the state apathy that the main idea among the people of I wouldn't say Bengal, but people who are not much aware of Sundarban situation, they are like, this happens there every year, and the people will overcome it. The state will provide them certain remunerations and situation, and they will bounce back like that. But nobody understands the situation they are facing unless you actually go and talk to them. The emotional conversations you have with them, they make you, rethink our purpose in life, and they sometimes make you question that we often bother with such minuscule things in our life that we are not attaining. But why do we do that? Because we have no idea of the grave situation that the marginalized and the oppressed are facing all over the world. So because they are the ones who are the victims of resilience as well. So this is something that I wanted to discuss with you and share. Uh, so if you have any questions, you can just let me know. I know it was a long, discussion. So any kind of question you have, take your time and just let me know. I'll try to help you out as much possible.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
So you mentioned about this ecological resilience, and
Yeah.
there was a diagram where you showed that there can be different states as well. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to know whether this example is correct. So, for example, there were dinosaurs at one point of time, and
Yeah.
then meteor hit the Earth. Can that be viewed as a perturbation, and then the Earth without dinosaurs, that is the next state after the perturbation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, the thing is, we need to understand that is the ecological disturbances or an ecological state is constantly changing. That's what we thought of. That's the difference between engineered resilience and ecological resilience. That's why C.S. Erlings evolved his definition. When we're talking about the state of the the era of dinosaurs, the Earth was in one form in that way. But after the meteor hit, it was not only the dinosaurs that got affected, the entire Earth got affected. The environment changed, the wildlife changed, the flora and fauna got affected. So basically, the Earth was in a process of transformation until it came back to a state of balance, when again, life could actually, come forth again. And that is the state of ecological resilience. So basically, the ecosystem stood resilient to that particular perturbation, to that disturbance, and transformed into a new state of balance or equilibrium. And that is what ecological resilience is.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, can any of you share with me any stories of, resilience that you have seen? in the past 2 years. It can be anything, a story of ecological, social, or socio-ecological, anything, any story of resilience. It can be something that you have seen from outside your home or seen on your TV. Just share a story.
And does it have to be within the past how many years?
It doesn't have to be past. I'm just saying that because in the last 2 years we all have faced a similar situation, a similar variable we faced, and this particular term resilience became a household term. So any kind of story you have seen that
Uh,
reminds of the resilience, you can share.
So, ma'am, I saw this in a documentary. It's not very recent or anything,
Yeah.
but there was a documentary by David Attenborough, and
Okay.
they were showing the state of Chernobyl in Ukraine right now.
Ah,
So,
I saw it. Right, right, right.
yes,
Yes.
ma'am, and what they showed was that a lot of flora and fauna has returned to that region because no
Yes.
humans have been living there for so long. So that showed how resilient nature was. That in the
Absolutely.
absence of environmental degradation caused by humans, nature will spring back to life.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And in that documentary, what amazed me was that this particular site in Chernobyl is still deemed as uninhabitable, where people can never live here again every day. And nature is actually going against all these odds to prove that you cannot actually tame nature in any possible forms. Life will always find a way, as you said, Pranav. Any other story? Any local
Ma'am,
story? Yeah.
in the past few years, we saw several vendors showing resilience towards means surviving since they got unemployment and there was no source of income for them, and they still showed resilience and survived through. And now means the business is again prospering for several vendors.
Abhijit, how do you think that they were resilient in these years? Like, how do you think they actually came to this particular point when now again shops are opening, and how did they survive over the years? What do you think about that?
Ma'am, I think they several generous people helped them, and they cut down their means to survive through the difficult time.
Yeah. So, so do you think that this particular situation that they were facing, that they had to cut down their means, was it something that is it a kind of resilience that they would any people would actually like to have, or this is something that they had to find because they had no other choice to but be this? What do you
They
think
had
about
no choice. They had no choice but to do this.
it? Right.
It was forced upon them.
Yeah, exactly. It was forced upon them. And so this is something that you guys can actually think about. Like whenever we talk of, over these 2 years, I have heard so many TED talks from various gurus. I will not stereotype anybody, but from various Western motivational speakers as well, that how resilience is a key to well-being, a key to happiness. And something that struck me was that how they spun off every situation into a very positive reinforcement. I understand it is important to be positive in life, but I never see a man say to a very person in a less privileged situation. Uh, I never see a rich man telling a poor person that be positive, everything will be okay. It never occurs because of the lack of choices a marginalized or an oppressed or a less privileged person has. So whenever you are thinking of resilience, I would like you guys to think of all the limitations, this resilience discourse has, that has happened over the years, and think of that from your own, scenarios. Think of what is happening around your home, or what you can see on TVs and social media, and think that whenever these people are told that how they are adapting to the situations, and instead of using resilience as a buzzword, how tangible solutions can be provided for these people or for an ecosystem, so that it is better prepared to deal with that situation in case of vulnerability, in case a vulnerable situation strikes. Like and go on. Like I don't think this is just the end of the pandemic. There will be a lot of situations in future that we will be facing again, but I hope that people from different backgrounds, from different means, have appropriate tools to deal with that situation. And that is what true resilience would be. That gives people from all backgrounds the appropriate tools for adaptiveness, so that they can actually overcome that situation in a desirable manner that they need, where their basic needs must not have been scrapped. So, any questions? Anything you guys want to share? Okay, then. If you guys still have any questions, even after the class ends, you guys can reach me out at my email ID. I think Shorodip shared it the last time. I'll be happy to discuss that. And in tomorrow's class, we will be going forward with another story of South Asian environmental humanities.
Ma'am, can you please provide the slides to us?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'll provide the slides. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Gopal. We need 4 volunteers for today's class. One is Gopal, and who are the others to nominate themselves as the volunteers?
I have talked to ma'am.
Yeah. Aditya, I
Sir, I'm-
found your name
Okay, sir.
in that mail.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I was copied there. I know.
Pradeep.
You are traveling. Okay, Pradeep, Gopal,
Sir, Akshat.
Mubashir, and
Akshat.
Pratyush. Okay.
Sir, actually one of my friends like Anand is also has told about the class highlights.
Yeah.
So like total how many people are doing it exactly? Can you?
Exactly, there are 4 people for this class, for this session only. Mubashir, Gopal, Anand already, I think Anand already assigned for class highlights, isn't it?
No, sir, it is this time, sir. I mailed yesterday, and you had said yes.
Oh, yeah. It has been approved by ma'am. Right. Okay,
Yes, sir.
Anand. And who else are left with?
I
Pradeep.
Aditya sir.
Aditya, okay. So what to do? There are also Pratyush, Akshat, and Aditya who will.
Sir, I had also mailed ma'am beforehand and I've
Okay.
taken permission.
We are reserving Pratyush and Akshat for tomorrow's part. Please don't mind for today. So Mubashir, Gopal, Anand, and Aditya for today's session on resilience. Okay, is it
Yes,
fine?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Thank you all for listening, and see you guys tomorrow.
We will
Thank you,
share
ma'am.
all the materials, and we have shared it also in the folders assigned with the names of Roktima Ghosh and Shreyoshi Bhattacharya. You will find all the things there, and once the complete slide is obtained from our instructor, and we will be keep uploading. We will keep uploading there. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.